All right, hope you guys are doing well. We're going to move on today. We're going to talk about prohibition and how this is something that's going to really change the dynamics, the social life, uh, everything in American society in the 1920s. And this was just a huge shock to many Americans, especially in the modernist society, right? And industrial factories, you name it, in these cities, these bigger, large cities, because that's a way of life for many, many years. It's like, let's go down, spend our money or spend our wages down at the bar, down at the saloon, down at the club, and have fun. And drinking was something that many people did to try to really just take the edge off of working these industrial jobs, things like that. So, real quick, bell ringer for today. So, describe what the temperance movement was, what resulted from the temperance movement in the 1920s, and what were the names of the groups of people who clashed about the sale and distribution of alcohol. So I'll give you a second. You can pause the video, write down your response, and I'll review it here soon with you. Okay, temperance movement. The temperance movement was a movement that started in the early 1800s, okay, mid 1800s, let's say. And this was a way for mostly women, and there's a lot of traditionalists, fundamentalists that gain push for this type of movement as well. But for the most part, this is really, they try to end the sale, production, distribution of alcohol. And the reason for that is because in these traditional style, families, households, they thought abuse, they thought neglect, they thought a lot of the funds that the male would make in, let's say, the factory or working out the farm field, that would go towards booze. And let's face it, not everybody's in the right mentality and mindset when they're drinking beer and alcohol, things like that. So these fundamentalists thought, well, this is going to cause some issues for us, right? We need to try to end the sale and distribution of alcohol, production of it, because if so, our family is going to be better, right? The male, the adult, the father figure in that home is going to spend more time with that family. There's going to be a lot less abuse at home. Funding money will go towards the family rather than just sitting at the bar all night, because let's face it, many people work for many, many hours a day until this progressive movement went through. And this caused a lot of issues at home. Okay. And they wanted to try to end that. They wanted to try to move forward, move past it. So they thought, well, let's just end the sale and distribution, this prohibition, right? And we'll talk about the Volstead Act a little bit today and how that was enacted to push in order to try to bring back these moral values, these good characteristics to households, things like that. All right. So what resulted of the temperance movement? The Volstead Act, which is one of your vocab terms, and the Prohibition, right? The 18th Amendment. And what were the names of the groups of people that clashed in the sale and distribution of alcohol? So again, we have the traditionalists, the fundamentalists, or another name is the dries, because they didn't want alcohol. They didn't want the sale, production, and distribution of alcohol to happen. So these dries thought, well, this is a good idea. This is going to bring good family core values back to the household, to the family, and this is going to help overall the dynamics, the social life aspects of the United States. Bring it back to good traditional values. And then the modernists, because they're out in the cities, many of these people working in these industries, these factories, they want to spend their wage, their money on a fun time, entertainment, right? They want to go to the ballpark, right? They want to go spend their movie at talkies, which are movies. They want to spend their money on different types of items, appliances that they can put in their house. They want to spend their money going to the bar, going to the club, you name it. And these people, the modernists, are also called wets because they wanted alcohol to be still present in their lifestyle. So that's the temperance movement. Those are the groups of people. And what emerged was the Prohibition, 18th Amendment, and Volstead Act. There you go. All right, so today, let me go through this real quick. There it is. All right, so we talked yesterday about the temperance movement, how propaganda pieces were put out on posters, magazines, newspapers, broadcasted over the radio. Before movies, you'd see propaganda pieces. And this was to bring back these core values. Again, you won't really see this much in the cities. Here and there you would, but for the most part, it was mostly this temperance movement, this fundamentalist view was in the southeast, right, the west, the south, and in these rural areas, okay, outside of these urban cities. All right, speakeasies, bootleggers. All right, because this was becoming an alarming issue for many people, these modernists in the cities, they thought, well, we need to try to take the edge off. We need to still try to bend the rules here a bit. And and let's face it, most of the immigrant groups that were coming into the United States, their whole culture, their whole lifestyle is based off of drinking alcohol. All right, especially people from Ireland, Great Britain, Germany, right? This was huge in their lifestyle and their culture. There's Oktoberfests, right? There was different types of celebrations, which alcohol was presently available constantly for these people. And this was a huge shock to many of these people when they came to America and when this prohibition was really being pushed out and the 18th Amendment occurred. What do you do? Okay, a lot of these bars, these restaurants, they made a living off of selling alcohol. And it's still prevalent today, right? You almost can relate it to with some of these lockdowns today, how this is causing some issues with some of these restaurants, how they're buying and purchasing a lot of this alcohol from these distribution centers, these manufacturers, right? And they can't spend it, they can't sell it. So what happens to that restaurant, that bar? It shuts down. People lose their lifestyle, they lose their job. Okay, so a way around it that these people came up with in these larger cities, I won't say it didn't happen in rural areas, but for the most part, it happened in bigger cities. Speakeasies. All right, so speakeasies were these hidden bars, okay, located in these cities. I won't say they're hidden because many of the police officers, after their shift, they would go up and drink too. They're just like, this amendment, this law is kind of stupid. I'm going to go down and drink it up with the boys after work, after this night shift. So these speakeasies were established as hidden bars. It came to a point where you walk up to the door, you knock on the door, you say a password. Some guy comes up, it's like, hey, what's the password? You give them the password, and they let you in. And it's just this hidden, almost like an underground bar. All right. And these bars would be located all throughout the city. And there's actually a pretty neat bar down in Harrisburg on 2nd Street, which when you're 21, you can check it out. It's something very similar to that. You walk in, you have to give like a password, which they just let you in anyhow. And you're sitting in like this hair salon, which is pretty neat. So you sit in this hair salon for like, I don't know, a couple minutes with your friends. And all of a sudden you see the door swing open of the wall, and it's just this huge club. It's pretty cool. And that's kind of what speakeasies were all about. I think it's pretty neat how that bar down in Harrisburg does that, because it's just kind of brings back to what actually happened during these times in the 1920s. All right, bootleggers. So these are people who smuggled alcohol in from Canada, from Cuba, the West Indies, you name it. And they were trying to obviously make a killing off it, make a living. And this is where you see a lot of organized crime occurring. So with Al Capone, this movement with different types of rival gangs selling alcohol. Right nowadays, it might be like different types of drugs, but this time in the 1920s, alcohol was pretty much king. And everybody knew what Al Capone was doing, but the cops, political officials, public officials, they were all in on it too. So they're just like, well, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. Who's gonna stop us if the authority is actually drinking and buying these sort of things and working almost for the gangs, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So these bootleggers, right? These bootleggers would go around and they would, at first it was called bootleggers because they would strap the alcohol to their pants leg, right? Well, to their leg, and then they would just run their pants over top of it. And you'd have no idea what's underneath their pants. Okay. And then it would even come to a point where they're hiding alcohol in these crates. So they have this crate, they have a product, and at the time, for packaging purposes, they put straw, hay, whatever it was, mostly straw, and they would package that in. You bring out the item, which let's say it was a leg lamp, since Christmas story was a big thing at the time, just recently, right? And then you'd smash out the bottom of it, and there would be liquor, booze, at the bottom of the crate. Another example would be, let's say, the milkman, right? The milkman would go around, and he would try to hide his alcohol, his types of liquor, you name it, inside of milk bottles, which is pretty neat. Mason wagons. Okay, as these wagons were going down, you pull out the bricks. Guess what? What's inside? Alcohol, booze. And bootlegging was there's a lot more other examples of it, but that was just a way of trying to transport alcohol and make sure that you can hide it, conceal it, so that authorities won't stop you. And if they did, just pay them off. Not a big deal, right? So here's an example of bootleggers here going and hiding in all their different types of barrels, you name it. Interesting enough, Yingling, we should maybe take a tour there. Who knows? But Yingling Factory talks about the Prohibition, how they're hiding liquor, booze, inside the mountain in Pottsville, which is pretty cool. It was like an old mining tunnel, pretty much. They're hiding a lot of different alcohol, booze down there to keep it cold, especially. And during the Prohibition, they started making ice cream, different types of different types of things like that. So they shifted towards making booze, alcohol, and Prohibition came around and like, I guess we can just make ice cream, chips, you name it, whatever it might be. And they started making different types of goods like that. All right, like I mentioned before, because the Prohibition was happening, and the fundamentalists, the traditionalists won this aspect a lot. Prohibition contributed to the growth of organized crime in a major city. So Al Capone, one of the most notorious, we'll talk about more Bugsy Moran, things like that, a little bit more in detail, maybe tomorrow or something. But Al Capone, famous bootlegger, famous, I guess to say, crime lord, right, in Chicago. So in Chicago, he was one of the biggest um, control of liquor, bootleggers, business, you name it. So if anybody wanted booze out in the Midwest, they would go to Al Capone. And anybody that tried to rival him would be dead, would be killed. And it was so large that he was really famous, right? Babe Ruth, whenever he would play in Chicago, he would always hang out with Al Capone. Didn't matter. They both had equal respect for each other. And Babe Ruth knew, well, this guy's going to hook me up with the best types of alcohol, luxury style living, women, and entertainment. Right? He's going to have a good time for me. And Babe Ruth obviously was this big baseball star everybody knew about him. So it was pretty cool. But at the time, Al Capone, he really ran a strong hold of the alcohol distribution throughout Chicago. And there's many different types of violent crimes occurring under his name, under his watch. And a lot of this had to do with the creation of different types of gangs, mobs that would be forming in the 1920s because of sale of alcohol. And we'll talk about the Untouchables a little bit later. Usually I show a movie at the end of this chapter, but since we're a little bit behind because everything going on, I don't know if we're going to get to it. But the Untouchables with Elliott Ness, they took down Al Capone, not because of selling alcohol. They couldn't ever really catch him doing that. Everybody knew it. No one could stop him because the authorities, public officials, judges, you name it, were all on his side. He was paying them off. He was giving them alcohol. And again, not everybody really agreed with the law. So what are you going to do about it? You can't stop them. But these untouchables, these FBI agents were trying their best to try to crack down on 'em. So then Al Capone was finally convicted on tax evasion, charged in 1931. A lot of his profit, a lot of his money was made, let's face it, illegally. How do you mark it down? How do you stop this? How do you take note of what money he's making to tax it? You don't. And they got a hold of one of his bookies and just kind of fixed the code, or found out the passcodes to what he was using. That's how they stopped him. All right, so government fails to control liquor. So with that, many government officials that were following the law, trying to make example to many of the other citizens, they would take their alcohol. A lot of times, they would just give it back at night in the speakeasies. It's like, oh hey, you want to get it back? Come to the speakeasy. Here's a code. Spend your money down there because I have a hand in it, share in it, so it's not a big deal. That's what a lot of times would happen. Or they would dump it out, just dump it down in the sewer, dump it out in the streets. Okay, a lot of times, which committed over 10,000 deaths. They just reported that not too long ago. They just found out mostly. Many of these people, to stop the sale and distribution of alcohol, they would poison alcohol, beer. Do you believe it? So after poisoning this liquor, this alcohol, people would drink it, and over 10,000 people died in America because of this poison liquor and alcohol. It's a terrible thing to do, but I guess at the time that's what they thought the best thing to do was to stop the sale and distribution of alcohol. Let's just poison it. I don't think that's a great idea, but whatever. Okay, so enforcing it. How do you enforce it? There's so many different types of bars. There's so many different types of beer distribution centers, different types of companies that made beer and alcohol, liquor, you name it, in America. All these immigrant groups coming over. How do you stop it? You gotta try to hire a lot of a huge mass, a huge assortment of police officers to try to crack down on it. And that's just going to really break the state, right? It's going to break the government to the point where how do you pay all these people? It's just impossible. And let's face it, it caused more crime, more violence to happen in the United States rather than actually curing it to solve it. So what do you do? There's not much you can do to stop it. And I think that's pretty interesting. Okay. All right. That's all I got for today. I'll go over some of these other things tomorrow. Well, actually, here, real quick, I want to show you this political cartoon. So this political cartoon today, don't worry, you don't have to do it. Okay, organized crime. Here's a political cartoon I wanted to go over today, and I think it's pretty interesting here. So organized crime, this is like Al Capone, the gangs, the mobs that were occurring during the 1920s. As you see, he has money bags all around him. He's making huge profit. As you see, bootleg profits right here. This huge keg full of money, full of cash. It's like, oh, this guy's really killing it. How are you going to stop him? And then you have the money to buy jurors, money to break the law, okay, money to pay off judges, you name it, money to hire the best lawyers, money to bribe politicians, okay, pardons, you name it. And then here's the law. Here's the police force, the authority trying to stop with the 18th Amendment, the Volstead Act. How do you stop them? Shoot off your gun, and you think that gun's really going to penetrate this man who's really strong, armored? Okay, he has a huge axe. No, it's not going to do nothing. Right? And gang rule, right? That's his huge axe. That's not going to do anything to him. So organized crime was just huge at the time. It was larger than life to a point where even the authority couldn't crack down or stop him. So I thought that this political cartoon was pretty cool. It's labeled bulletproof. There you go. And I thought it was interesting. Really expresses what's going on with the prohibition. All right, real quick. Here's vocab terms I forgot to show you. So write these down. Prohibition, 18th Amendment, Volstead Act, and bootlegger. So I'll give you a couple seconds. You can pause the video, write those down, and there you go. Okay, that should be good enough for you. So write those down. You can write out the definitions yourself. And then tomorrow, I want to do an activity with you. Well, I can't do it with you, but I'll put it up for you, and along with the video. And that'll be it for tomorrow. It's just kind of detailing and really shaping up what we reviewed over today with prohibition. Okay, have a good one, guys.